Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you some of the best college football news, predictions, and analysis. Make sure to like this video, go follow us on Twitter at Gridiron Expert, and check out our official website, thegridironexpert.com, where you can sign up for our weekly newsletters and also sign up for our expert picks. The links for all of those things are in the description below, so do not miss out on any of this extra college football content. Today, guys, we are bringing you our second game of the week, and unfortunately, it is a game that might get overshadowed a little bit due to number 2 LSU taking on number 3 Alabama later on Saturday afternoon. But before that, we have our own big game, our own Battle of the Unbeatens between number 4 Penn State and number 17 Minnesota. And of course, we are here to break down this matchup for you, share what to expect on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball, and the keys for the game. Whether Penn State will remain as one of the committee's top 4 teams in the country, or whether Minnesota, who some think is too low in these rankings, will make a major statement win at home and jump in these rankings that will come out next Tuesday. So we're going to give you a little backstory on these two teams. Penn State so far this season, as we mentioned, claimed the number 4 spot in the committee's rankings that just came out on Tuesday. And they did that because they have quality wins over Pittsburgh, Iowa, Michigan, and Michigan State. 2 of those, Iowa and Michigan State, coming on the road. In those games, Penn State held those opponents to an average of 12.5 points per game. So the Nittany Lions have been phenomenal both on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. In my opinion, one of the more sound teams on both the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. And you've heard me say that I think Ohio State is that one team, the number 1 team in the country right now, but that one team that I think doesn't really have any weaknesses offensively or defensively, and I would put Penn State close to that as well. So they are looking very good, looking like a major college football playoff contender, much like we would expect under James Franklin, much like he has had them in previous years. But we have a very surprising team in Minnesota right now, who under P.J. Fleck is off to one of the best starts in school history, a perfect 8-0 record and 5-0 in Big Ten conference play. Now, those 5 wins, as impressive they have been, Minnesota has won those by an average of 26.8 points per game. They've come against a group of opponents that as of right now have a combined record of 17-28. Those teams, of course, Purdue, Illinois, Nebraska, Rutgers, and Maryland. So Minnesota did and has done what a good team should do, which is against inferior opponents, especially in conference play, they go and take care of business. The only game that was relatively close was a touchdown victory for Minnesota against Purdue. Besides that, they have annihilated everybody else in Big Ten conference play, and that's what good teams should do. So credit to P.J. Fleck and the Golden Gophers for doing that, but this game against Penn State is by far their biggest test of the season. It's the biggest test that they will face offensively and defensively. So will they be up for the challenge on a cold and rainy atmosphere and a cold and rainy day in Minnesota? 35 degrees and raining, which the weather will absolutely play a major role in this game on Saturday morning. So let's get started on the offenses here. Both these offenses for Penn State and Minnesota can be very, very explosive. They have the ability to turn it on at any given second, which is obviously a nightmare for both of these defenses. And we'll start with Penn State, a team that's averaging 38.5 points per game, one of the best offenses in the entire nation. And they're doing that with a fairly balanced offense. 252 passing yards per game from Sean Clifford, and 170 rushing yards per game, led by their leading rusher in Noah Cain. Now, I will go on record and say that I think Sean Clifford and that dynamic wide receiver in KJ Hamler is one of the best, if not the best, duo in college football. KJ Hamler is so fast, so explosive, one of those players that you can give him a 5-yard pass and he can turn it into a 30 or 40-yard gain. He's very, very difficult to stop for opposing defenses, and Sean Clifford has surprised the heck out of me, putting up some big-time numbers in replacement of Trace McSorley, who departed after last season. I did not expect him to do that well this year. but he has proven me wrong, proven all the other doubters wrong, and has Penn State in college football playoff contention. 20 touchdowns for Clifford this year, 8 of those going to KJ Hamler, who averages 16.8 yards per reception. Those are ridiculous stats, guys. I don't care who they're playing against. It's just a ridiculous stat for a wide receiver, averaging nearly 20 yards per reception. Now, Noah Cain, we mentioned, for the running game for Penn State, he could be the difference maker. We want to put a lot of emphasis on this passing game from Penn State. But once again, with the weather being the way it is, with it being a cold day, with it being a rainy day, so the ball is going to be slick, the ground's going to be slick, the running game for both teams could be the key in this one. And Noah Cain is averaging 5.1 yards per carry as a freshman, already has 6 touchdowns on the year. So expect Penn State to utilize him as much as possible, whether it's on the ground or trying to get him implemented in the passing game just a little bit. So watch out for him. I think he could be kind of the X factor for this Penn State offense. Now for Minnesota, they're very similar to Penn State, averaging 38.4 points per game, just a tenth of a point less than the Nittany Lions, and they are much more balanced. The Golden Gophers are much more balanced offensively than Penn State, averaging 225 passing yards per game and 204.5 rushing yards per game. So that is something that really benefits Minnesota in this game. If Penn State takes away one or the other, they're still going to have either that passing attack or that rushing attack. And I will say the passing attack, more so than Penn State, has surprised me from Minnesota this year because of the efficiency of Tanner Morgan at quarterback. He's one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the Big Ten this season, completing 65% of his passes, 18 touchdowns, and just 4 interceptions. This Minnesota team does a phenomenal job of taking care of the football and making you pay if you turn the ball over. And something that Penn State hasn't done too often this season, but if they do, with a road environment and a very cold and wet game, Minnesota's going to make them pay for it. Now, I mentioned Tanner Morgan is one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten, or one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the Big Ten. And he's got those marks not because he is a skilled quarterback, but because he's got a phenomenal crew of wide receivers with Rashad Bateman, Tyler Johnson, many who consider to be one of the best wide receivers in the conference, and then Chris Ottman-Bell. They're putting up big-time numbers and have been a major reason why this passing attack under P.J. Fleck has thrived. But once again, the X factor for Minnesota in this game might not be the wide receivers, might not be Tanner Morgan. It might be Rodney Smith, the leading rusher for Minnesota, 889 yards, 7 touchdowns, averaging 5.8 yards per carry. Expect both teams to try to get that ground game going in a game like this. And I think Noah Cain and Rodney Smith can do just that, although I will go on record and say that I think if I had to choose who had the edge there, I would give it to Rodney Smith in Minnesota. Same for Minnesota and their wide receivers as well. I think collectively, the Golden Gophers have a little bit more of an edge with all of their wide receivers, more so than Penn State. But the defense, guys, we're going to switch gears and talk about the defense. That is where Penn State owns the obvious edge, in my opinion. So Minnesota might own a slight edge in terms of talent and collective talent offensively, maybe. But defensively, there's no discussion. It's all Penn State. And the defense for both of these teams will be the key in this one, more so than their rushing attacks. It's going to be the defenses. I expect this game to be somewhat low-scoring, actually. But Penn State has one of the best defenses, not just in the Big Ten, but in the entire country, allowing just 9.6 points per game and just 68.4 rushing yards per game. So we mentioned that the running game might be very key for Minnesota, but it's not going to matter if they can't get anything going against one of the best rushing defenses in the entire country. Fortunately for Minnesota, we mentioned earlier how balanced they are, and that if Penn State were to take away the pass or the run, they would still have the other. Penn State has been very generous against the pass this year, allowing 211.6 passing yards per game. That could pose a problem in a game like this, with an efficient and accurate quarterback with Tanner Morgan and a talented crew of wide receivers. Penn State's rushing defense, I think, will remain the same. But can their passing defense step it up and shut down a Minnesota passing attack that has gotten better every single week? Something that should also be noted, though, for Penn State, if you're a little worried about this game, Penn State, just in Big Ten play alone, just Big Ten conference play, has forced 11 turnovers. So they know how to turn the ball over. They know how to force interceptions. They know how to get some fumbles, something that Minnesota has to be cautious about going into this game offensively. Now, the Golden Gophers, their defense, not to rag on them. I said Penn State has the clear advantage, and I still believe that. But the Golden Gophers do have a solid defense as well. They have allowed just 20 points per game. Not a bad mark, but it's not great. But as we mentioned, this is the toughest offense that Minnesota has faced. And some will be quick to say that, well, some of those points that Minnesota has allowed this season have come against their second and third string defenses because they've been blowing teams out of the water, so they took their starters out. Maybe that's the case, but I'm just reading the numbers here, and I still believe that even with their starters in games against South Dakota State, Fresno State, and Georgia Southern, games where they allowed lots of points, 21, 28, 31, stuff like that, then that was against their first-team defense. So I'm not really buying the second and third string excuses there. The first string defense is solid, but not anywhere close to Penn State, and they're going up against the toughest offense they have faced this season. Now, Minnesota, like all they are offensively, fairly balanced defensively in terms of how many yards they allow, 166.4 through the air, 117.4 on the ground. And I circled that number because the 117.4 rushing yards per game is a major cause of concern. I know I keep mentioning the weather, and I know both of these teams in their respective states, when it gets cold, they're used to it. They play in cold states. They play in some high weather games. But 35 degrees and raining, I can promise you that these teams are going to want to hammer it on the ground. And obviously Minnesota's rushing defense is a much weaker than Penn State, and that might bode well for the Nittany Lions offense, kind of pounding the rock with Noah Cain in this one, and could potentially set up the pass for Sean Clifford to KJ Hamler. So what are the keys for this game? How could Minnesota pull off a major upset that would majorly shake up the college football playoff rankings and the college football playoff race and even the Big Ten title race? Or how will Penn State take care of Minnesota and keep their college football playoff hopes alive and remain undefeated more than likely going into that game against Ohio State that will not only determine the Big Ten East, but could determine which team makes the college football playoff? Well, the keys for Minnesota being at home, which could be a huge benefit in this game. You know how I am when it comes to home field advantage. But the key for Minnesota is to get a pass game going. And I know that could be easier said than done, especially if the rain is coming, as many think it will. But they have to get the pass game going because Penn State, as we mentioned, their passing defense is much weaker than their run defense. Minnesota has a good core of wide receivers. You have to utilize it. You have to get creative on offense to beat this elite Penn State defense. So utilize those wide receivers. Get them out for some easy throws for Tanner Morgan. Quick slants, little screens here and there. You don't have to do anything fancy. Just get the ball out of Tanner Morgan's hands and let the receivers do the rest of the work. Yards after the catch are going to be huge in this game. I don't expect many quarterbacks to take too many deep shots. So getting the ball out to these good wide receivers for both Penn State and Minnesota is going to be huge to allow those receivers to get yards after the catch and march these teams down the field. So Minnesota, get a pass game going. You have to be able to move the ball because against an elite defense like this in Penn State, one that many teams have been unable to move the ball against, if you go 3 and out multiple times, especially early on as the crowd is still into it and hyped, you are giving Penn State a prime opportunity to jump on you early, jump on an early lead, and take that crowd out of it right off the bat. So don't start off slow, and you have to move the ball. Even if the drive stalls, make sure it's farther down the field and try to pin that Penn State offense deep in their own territory. And then defensively for Minnesota, finally, get pressure early on with Sean Clifford. Get pressure on him early. He does a phenomenal job of his pocket awareness. He has a phenomenal job of getting the ball out early. Like Minnesota, he takes very good care of the football. But if you rattle him early in a hostile road environment, it could kind of rattle his Penn State offense all the way around and slow them down right out of the gate. For Penn State, we mentioned that Minnesota can't afford a slow start. For Penn State, their key is to get a fast start. I really envision this game, guys, to be somewhat similar scenario-wise, like the Maryland game we saw back in September for the Nittany Lions. It's a home team, the Maryland home team, and now we have Minnesota hyped. They're looking good. They've got an elite team coming to town, and Maryland laid an egg, lost 59-0. And I'm not saying that's in store for Minnesota here, but Penn State jumped on them early and took the crowd out of it and showed that, you know, Maryland was overrated and we're here to take care of business. They were up 21-0 early second quarter. If Penn State can get a fast start like that, jump on them, score a quick 10 points, score a quick 14 points, and have Minnesota playing from behind early on in this game, that's going to be huge for James Franklin and his football team. Additionally, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Minnesota's rushing defense, weaker than Penn State, has a prime opportunity for Noah Cain to put up some big yards, and if they run, it will set up the pass and that big play connection from Sean Clifford to KJ Hamler, and they can utilize the big man, maybe with that play action with Pat Frymuth as well, the tight end for Penn State. Had 3 touchdowns against Michigan State a few weeks ago, a road win for Penn State. You run it a lot, you sell that play action, that big old tight end is going to be wide open just about every single time. So that is the key for Penn State. And here's what I expect to happen in this game at Minnesota. I expect both teams to start off extremely slow. It's an early morning game. It's 11 o'clock kickoff Central Time at least. It's cold. It's rainy. No one wants to be there. The fans are going to be energized, but I expect both teams to struggle at first. I don't expect either of these teams to get much offensively, get much going offensively early on. But Penn State will wake up. Penn State will wake up, and they will wake up in a hurry. James Franklin's going to light a fire under this team early. And I said this reminds me a lot of the Maryland game. I think Penn State comes into a hostile road environment with a team that is excited to host the number 4 team in the country, one of the best seasons they've had in a long time, the moment they've been waiting for. They're high, full of energy, and Penn State just comes in and deflates them. I think the Nittany Lions start slow, but I think they win this game by no less than 10 points. Minnesota has yet to play anybody. Their strength of schedule hasn't impressed me. Playoff committee agreed, ranking them as low as number 17 despite being 8-0. Toughest opponent they faced yet. I don't think Minnesota's there quite yet. Phenomenal job from PJ Fleck and his squad this year. Very worthy of that contract extension. But the Golden Gophers are unable to get the job done at home against the number 4 team in the country with the Penn State Nittany Lions. They keep their college football playoff hopes alive. And Minnesota, still at the top of the West, but still has a lot to work on to win that division and potentially try to get to the Big Ten Championship. So guys, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Make sure to go follow us on Twitter at Gridiron Expert. Make sure to go to our official website, thegridironexpert.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Sign up for the expert picks. And also, in the link in the description below, go sign up over at BetNow. You get a 50% signing bonus if you sign up today using our code GRIDIRON. Football season is nearing an end, but we still have plenty of games left, plenty of bowl games left, and we still have the NFL and college basketball as well. So don't miss out on that opportunity. Go sign up at BetNow. Link in the description below, as well as everything else. And once again, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.